The cargo bay doors sealed with a hiss. Dr. Miranda Lane stood in the center of the empty hangar, adjusting her equipment vest. Through the observation deck above, the Scaran Admiralty watched with barely concealed skepticism. "The human insists she requires no protective gear," Admiral Thresh announced, his 4 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns. "She claims this demonstration will prove her species worthy of the xenobiology research grant." The other officers chittered their amusement. Humans were newcomers, soft-bodied mammals from a backwater planet. Their application to study Scaran juveniles had been rejected twice already. "Release the hatchling," Thresh commanded. A reinforced crate descended on mechanical lifts. The metal groaned as something inside threw its weight against the walls. Scaran hatchlings were notoriously volatile. Their species had evolved on a tidally locked world where the Terminator line between eternal day and night bred creatures of extreme aggression. At just 3 weeks old, this hatchling had already killed 2 handler drones. The crate opened. The creature that emerged was all serrated edges and hunger. 8 limbs ending in hooks, a carapace that shifted through colors like oil on water, mandibles that dripped paralytic venom. It was the size of a large dog but infinitely more lethal. The sensory stalk swiveled, locking onto Miranda. Miranda did something unexpected. She turned her back on it. The officers above gasped. Turning away from a Scaran hatchling violated every survival instinct of every species in the Council. It was suicide. Miranda knelt down and opened her equipment case. From it, she pulled out a small containment sphere. Inside, bioluminescent organisms swirled in lazy spirals, casting soft blue light. She set it on the floor and activated the device. The organisms began pulsing in rhythmic patterns. The hatchling charged, then stopped. Its stalks oriented on the light. The aggressive color shifts in its carapace slowed, then began to match the rhythm of the pulsing organisms. "Scaran hatchlings have underdeveloped occipital processing," Miranda said calmly, still not looking at the creature. "They're overwhelmed by the sensory input of their environment. It triggers panic responses that manifest as aggression. They're not attacking because they're predators. They're attacking because they're terrified and overstimulated." She pulled out a second device, a sonic dampener. The harsh echoes of the metal hangar softened, muffled. The hatchling's carapace colors shifted from aggressive reds and oranges to curious purples and blues. "Your species evolved in a zone of perpetual twilight. Stable, predictable light levels. Constant atmospheric pressure. But you've been raising hatchlings in standard Council environments, bright lighting, varying temperatures, multiple sound frequencies. You're torturing them without realizing it." The hatchling approached the light sphere. Its movements were no longer predatory. They were exploratory, almost playful. It tapped the sphere gently with one hooked limb, watching the organism scatter and reform. Miranda finally turned around. She sat cross-legged on the floor, several feet from the hatchling. From her vest, she produced a small packet, preserved algae from the Terminator zone, grown in Earth laboratories specifically for this moment. She tossed it gently toward the hatchling. The creature snatched it from the air with frightening speed, then paused. Instead of devouring it immediately, the hatchling approached Miranda. It deposited the food at her feet, a gesture that shocked every Scaran watching. "Food sharing," Miranda explained. "It's not supposed to develop this trait for another 6 weeks according to your data, but it will if the hatchling isn't in a constant state of survival stress." She picked up the algae packet and opened it, breaking off a piece. She offered it on her palm. The hatchling took it delicately, its venom-dripping mandibles somehow avoiding her skin entirely. Admiral Thresh descended to the hangar floor, his movements stiff with disbelief. In 300 generations, no outsider has ever successfully approached a hatchling without sedation or restraints. "Because you've been treating them like weapons instead of children with specific developmental needs," Miranda replied. She stroked one of the hatchling's sensory stalks. It leaned into the touch, emitting a low-frequency hum that indicated contentment, a sound the officers had never heard from a juvenile. "My species spent thousands of years learning to domesticate creatures far more dangerous than ourselves. We didn't do it through dominance or force. We did it through understanding what they actually needed. The hatchling crawled into Miranda's lap, curling its 8 limbs around her like a child seeking comfort. Its carapace had settled into soft teals and lavenders, colors that hadn't been documented in Scarn juveniles for decades, colors that the species displayed only in their ancestral twilight zones. Your hatchlings aren't monsters, Miranda continued, her voice gentle. They're children born into an environment that feels like chaos to their senses. Every instinct tells them they're in danger, so they lash out. But give them stability, predictability, the sensory conditions their biology expects, and they're capable of trust, of affection even. The hatchling chirped softly, a sound of complete security. Thresh's carapace had shifted to colors that indicated deep thought and humility. Grant approved, he said quietly. Whatever Earth wants to study, they may study. And Dr. Lane, we would request your immediate assistance in redesigning our entire hatchery protocol system. Miranda smiled, running her fingers along the hatchling's carapace in slow, soothing strokes. I thought you'd never ask. But understand, this isn't about human superiority. It's about perspective. Sometimes the newest voice in the room sees what everyone else has stopped questioning. Above, in the observation deck, the other officers stood in absolute silence, watching a human do what their entire civilization had deemed impossible, showing a monster that it never had to be one at all. The hatchling purred again, safe in Miranda's arms, finally experiencing what it should have felt from birth: peace.